hold it off the drink, please.
Okay, so introductions. I'm Danielle.
Stephanie. Paulina.
Hi, I'm Alec.
So our group we do locomotion, and locomotion is the body movement from one place to another. And we focus specifically on the aspects of running, leaping, jumping, sliding, galloping, and hopping.
So the purpose was to compare and contrast motor development between different age groups of male and female children, as well as to observe the subject's initial stage and their improvement with different methods of coaching and critique over 3 sessions.
And our subjects were boys and girls, ages 3 and 4, from the Early Child Learning Center. And we had trouble getting their attention, but our incentive of stickers helped a lot.
Okay, so our first kid we have is May. She's one of our adorable young 3-year-olds, and she was very excited to start and join us. And she was well motivated with the stickers and everything. But for a lot of these movements, she was very nervous to actually go on and do the complex stuff after running on her own. So mostly she'll have a partner or someone demonstrating with her while she goes through. And you can also notice in a lot of these videos, she's going to be moving in a zigzagged line and not actually straight and direct. That's because this is a much more dynamic movement and it requires a lot more balance. But she doesn't fully have developed quite at this stage yet. And so as you can see, she starts showing up just in this one. But yeah, so we used both auditory cues to help her learn and then the demonstrations like I mentioned earlier, but neither of which really helped her a lot to progress past the initial stage. Pretty soon, I think right after this one, I'm going to see her do her leaping as a good example of the initial stage when it comes around. But yeah, right after this guy. But for right now, watch her start to tone up in the end, and she has very good rhythm for this stuff. Here.
I also noticed that when Alec or Kai would teach her how to do something, she would really focus on that specific aspect of skipping. She could tell that Alec was really exaggerating high knees. So even though May never really got to the point of her being able to skip, like you would see skipping on a regular day, she really focused on that high knee. So she really adapted to what you mentioned.
Most of the auditory cues only work for very specific elements of the movement. The rhythm actually needed demonstration for anyone to pick up any progress with it. You can't really tell a person audibly to watch the toe tap and then jump forward. It was all too much for them to really perceive consciously. So right here, when she's hopping around, she starts jutting over to the wall, and then she quickly starts to fatigue with that. But for here in the leaping, she doesn't really use her arms as much to carry her momentum. It looks like another step, and she doesn't get much vertical jump to it. There's no hang time to it. So all these are signs of it just being a very initial stage for it. And she never really progressed past that level. She's very excited to be just around us for most of it and not necessarily focus on that.
But there you see, she just sprinted off and kind of lost all attention with this.
It could be over-exclusive, could be just disinterested, but oh well.
Okay, so this is going to be what I'm going to talk about with Jack. As a lot of you know, he was our 3-year-old that was very much over-exclusive. He was in the corner playing with a bucket of sand. It took a lot of convincing to get him to come over, and the big motivator was the stickers. One of the things that we noticed, though, is that as a 3-year-old, between the left and right hemispheres that get your brain working together is the corpus callosum, which develops around 4 years old, and being a 3-year-old, it hadn't fully developed. So he was having a really hard time doing some of the tasks that we were asking him that were more difficult. In the beginning of the video, you saw that he was running, he was walking, and it was really easy for those locomotions. But when we asked him to try and skip, that first video where he was kind of doing a weird little, I don't even know, that's his idea of skipping. And so one of the things you're going to see us do is actually give him the mnemonics, and he wasn't able to perform skipping with mnemonics. We gave him the visual aids, wasn't able to actually see and translate that. And so here's Danielle going extremely slow motion for skipping. And he sees what he wants to do, but he can't actually perform it. And so Jack just needs a little more time developing his cerebellum and his corpus callosum. We thought it would be really cool if we get a 3-year-old to learn how to skip. And actually, though, like, although he was very much stuck in the initial stage of locomotion, it was really cool to see Jack come out of his shell. We got him to become more comfortable with interacting with us and everything, because every time we would come to see him, he'd be playing with his bucket of sand, and I'd come over and I'd have to play with him at first, and then eventually they would be like, "Want to come practice what you learned?" And he'd be like, "Yeah." And so he would come over, and this is something that was actually really neat. We talked about, the idea of multitasking, and it's really difficult for a 3-year-old especially, because the motor programs are all there, and you'll see him as he comes over. His mouth hangs open, his tongue sticks out, his eyes go wide. That's because he's focusing so hard on the task that he wants to do, but he can't. And so some of those more subconscious motor programs start to slip. And he does what we call pretzel arming, where you bring your arms in. So yeah, that was Jack, the 3-year-old.
So next is Kylie. Kylie was 4 years old, and the first thing I noticed about Kylie is that she came over and she had this Pooh Bear, like, toy little thing that she carries everywhere. And like the first thing she did, she didn't even know me. She just like asked me if she could hold it, and she really focused on making sure it wasn't making her distracted, and that she could focus on the skipping and running and asking what we could do. She had great selective attention with that. And Kylie was also really eager to show us what she already knew and her prior knowledge of skipping and running, especially when she kind of looked at us and made sure that we could tell how fast she could run or how high she could skip. And then because of this, she had a lot of confidence with even helping other kids and teaching the other kids where they should put their foot placement, how they should use their arms. And a little later in the video, you'll see her and John David. They keep skipping and running and hopping together, and you can't hear the vocals, but they kind of like are like going off of like teaching each other kind of, and you can tell Kylie's really taking on that initiative to help him. And we also said that Kylie, she's still in the elementary stage and not in the mature stage yet, because she has really good rhythm and she uses her arms for upward force and for momentum, but she doesn't have the muscular strength to coordinate the whole entire skill together, as seen with like her hopping and her single leg, hopping and leaping. And she also does really well with the verbal cues. With Danielle was talking about jumping like a bunny, and before we even showed her what that looks like, she immediately started jumping with her hands right here, and had really good height and was jumping pretty far, and her feet were even getting to her butt. And it could look like that when she's jumping like a bunny with her hands right here, it would like keep her from like getting momentum and getting higher and having more speed. But we were focusing more on the mnemonic at that time for the 3 days, rather than her like improving so much and like having the furthest jump or the highest bunny action. And then also we had a piece of paper, you'll see in the videos, where we pretend like it was lava, and so they would jump over it like a leaping action, and that really got them to have a lot of force forward. And then also with Kylie, how she tends to fall a lot and catch herself, or even run really fast and then run into us. We could tell that she had a weak lower body and weak legs. And we also noticed that because of her age, and if you look at how long her legs were, and she's kind of like a noodle, really tall, we said that she had a higher sense of gravity, so she couldn't really coordinate like her upper body leaning over her center of gravity and focusing on like leaping and jumping. That's how she would fall forward or catch herself a lot. So Kylie would progress a lot with her.
All right, so next we have John David. He was 4 years old. He showed when he was hopping that he preferred his left foot, and if he continues to use this, it'll become more dominant. He showed signs of being over-exclusive right here, you can see, and throughout this day, you can see he's holding onto a sticker the whole time. He would not let go. His right hand was on the sticker the whole time. So that showed that he was so focused on his sticker. We also, it didn't take us long to see that he was a visual learner. He definitely improved a lot when we would have people demonstrate, like a lot of the other kids, but he specifically just liked having someone going at the same time. Not for comfort, because he showed confidence and he wanted to do the movements, but just to be able to learn in that way. And right here you can see in his running that he is using his arms, and he has that coordination to use his arms and some trouble hopping and jumping. You can see that he just doesn't have a lot of strength. Like, he would show favoritism towards his left foot when he was hopping, but then he would just crash down and he wouldn't be able to, like right there, he just stops and turns around. He doesn't go all the way to the end. And John David was definitely our most improved skipper right here. It's going to show a slow-mo clip of Kai and him both skipping at the same time after this galloping. He just improved his movement a lot. His rhythm got a lot better with practice over the 3 days. We just saw him improve. There it is.
Rhythm was definitely the most important thing for the 4-year-olds to develop because they already have like all the balance that they need and body coordination with it. It's just getting the timing and then just making it a subconscious movement for them.
So Rio was another 4-year-old, and one of the big things we noticed was that skipping was probably a new concept for her. But she did show really good coordination and balance as well, which you'll see in a couple seconds here. Yeah. So another example of balance. She never fell right there, but leaping as well with coordination. And then coming up is another example of her skipping, and you could tell that it required right here a lot of just cognitive focus for her to just even try to skip. And she was also really shy with us at first, but she ended up warming up. We would expect her to improve with her skipping with more coaching sessions because she's developmentally ready, but she just needed more time, and we would probably use like more incentives, and she'd be able to develop her rhythm and go from the elementary phase to the mature phase with slightly more time.
And another thing with Rio, that it just showed her leaping back and she kind of twisted around. She was excited to just like show us tricks and kind of experiment with the movements. Like she was like pretty confident when she went up to us.
Okay, so this is the compare and contrast, and overall what we realized is that there wasn't a huge difference between male and female until you actually look at age group. So with the 3-year-olds, most of them weren't cognitively developed enough to do some of the harder locomotions like skipping, whereas with the 4-year-olds, they had more experience, their brains were fully developed in that they could link both left and right hemispheres and could actually skip. And so between male and female, there wasn't a whole lot of the women being better than the men, but it all really came down to just age group and where their developmental stages were at.
Right, and then, so once the kids were actually developmentally ready, what we would take is more like the 4-year-olds than anyone else. And then if we could have more sessions, we would give them probably better incentives, and we would focus much more on actually carrying them through with demonstration and like visual cues. And then they would pick up the rhythm and move on, but yeah, like the 3-year-olds, they just didn't have it ready, they didn't have enough balance to focus on. They were trying to focus on too many things. The movement was very choppy because the motor programs weren't already established and it wasn't subconscious to focus on one bit at a time. So, right, it was just a lot more rhythm.
Yeah, so overall, the body control and coordination from the older kids that are more active really allowed them to learn the new movements more quickly. They didn't need to focus as much on balance and falling, but timing and foot placement required more focus for them.
And then also with the leg strength, not only in Kylie, but in a lot of the kids, especially the 3-year-olds, they didn't have as much leg strength as, say, coordination or just the ability to do it. So especially you can see with the single leg hopping, we would put all their focus on this one, either left or right leg, and they would hop until they either fall, which showed fatigue, or Kylie even said ow, which then definitely showed us that she didn't have any muscular strength to do this hopping yet. And this was definitely seen in the 3-year-olds more than the 4-year-olds.
And then to add on to the 3-year-olds, their movements were a lot like choppier and they didn't flow as well. And this was due because they're younger, but also the lack of neuromuscular development. And they had to focus so hard and give so much cognitive effort into their movements because they don't have that development yet. And they had to really focus. Like Jack, he would cross his arms like we showed earlier and like stick out his tongue because he was just so focused on his movements that he didn't even realize that he was doing that. So, any questions?
You did a good job, but on this compare contrast, was there any difference male female age group in recruitment? Could you get as many guys as you could girls?
It was very these are like a very select few of the ones that we could actually get on most all the days.
Right.
Everyone else was a lot more scattered and like inconsistent in the days that we could actually recruit them to. I guess a lot of them just weren't interested in just skipping. Like they would see someone with a balance beam or a baseball bat and things like that, or like the swings, and they wanted to go over to the more entertaining and more fun things. But it was pretty inconsistent with who would show up. It was mainly the kids that were very excited to see us and that we just like built a personal bond with, like Ty and Jack, who they were actually friends at the end of it. So yeah, it was more on like a personal level than it was actually like age or gender for that.
And then Isabella, we didn't have a video of her up, but we did have her come, and she kind of, when we asked her to do stuff, she'd be like, yeah, I know how to do that, like, because she was the oldest. So it was, we did give her some input because she didn't have everything perfected, but she kind of had she showed that she had that development, had that experience, and she was kind of like, oh yeah, I can make sure. So.